Most people who are attracted to drums start like this, tapping on anything they can find and driving everybody mad, and some of us never stop. And that's probably not a bad thing, because the art of getting different sounds and textures from different instruments by using coordination. And in fact, it's the coordination that puts people off. You hear people saying things like, I could never play drums because I can't get my four limbs to do different things at the same time. Well, actually, a moment's consideration will tell you that that's nonsense, because most of us learn to ride a bike or drive a car, and these activities require constant attention of the eyes and the ears whilst using all four limbs in a different sort of way. And that's exactly the same coordination that you require to become a drummer. Now, obviously, you can develop that skill to a very high level, and that depends on your determination and your innate ability. However, with this very, very basic, right from the beginning course, I reckon that just about anyone who's stuck at it and had a little go should be able to get right through to the end. And there's just a couple of things to mention. If you do get into trouble, two cardinal rules. One, do it slowly. You can do it as slowly as you like and you'll find it will work. And number two, if you get into difficulties, take it apart, do it one limb at a time, because doing all four limbs together, it is tricky, so do it one limb at a time and gradually build it up. To most people, the drum kit does look pretty complicated, particularly if you compare it with a single instrument like the guitar or the saxophone. And indeed the reason is because the drum kit is a collection of different instruments played by one individual. And if we go back to the marching band origins of the drum kit, we'll find that the bass drum, the side drums, the cymbals and so on are played by separate individuals. And the idea with the kit is that one individual attempts to copy what all those individuals would do separately in a coordinated fashion to play the kit as one. So let's look at the different parts of the kit. The bass drum now is sat on the floor, and it's held upright by the spurs, which fold into the side and which also stop it moving forward. It's played by a beater, a foot pedal, and this has spring tension on it which you can adjust to suit your technique. It has a beater, the stroke of which you can adjust to get a wide arc or a short arc. And the beater itself, the head of the beater, can be made of different sorts of materials. This is a hard felt beater, but you can also get wooden ones or plexiglass, various different kinds of material. The other important drum at the centre here is the snare drum. Now this is so called because if we look at the bottom of the snare drum, it's got a snare stretched across it. And the effect this has is to change the sound from this to this. The other important thing about the snare drum is it's very often made from a different material from the rest of the drum. As you can see, the rest of these drums are made from wood, whereas this drum has got, as you can see, a brass shell with steel hoops. And this other drum that we have here, this is actually an aluminium alloy, which is very light metal, again with steel hoops. But you can also get snare drums made from bronze, even graphite, as well as wood. And also the depth of the snare drum makes quite a lot of difference. So you can have a very thin 3-inch piccolo snare drum, right through to 8 or 9 inches, or even deeper sometimes, which is obviously going to give you a deeper sound. The commonest sort of snare drums are this sort of middle size here, 6.5 inch or maybe 5 inch, that sort of size like the other one we've just seen. The other drums here are called tom-toms, and the ones that are mounted on the bass drum are called hanging toms, and you can position them where you want by messing with this bass drum mount holder here. So you can position them just where you want them to be able to play them. The larger tom-toms are called floor tom-toms, and they either have legs of their own or they can be on a floor stand nowadays sometimes. The range of sizes is quite enormous. You can get from 6 or 8 inches right through to 18 inches across. What we've got here is a sort of a middle range, 10 inch, 12 inch, 14 inch, and these two toms on the bass drum, these are called power toms because they're quite deep. They're a couple of inches deeper than what used to be the standard size. So you can get standard size toms and you can get these power toms, which obviously give you a little bit more punch, a little bit more depth. Okay, let's move on to the cymbals. Perhaps the most interesting of the cymbals are the hi-hats. And these are a pair of horizontally mounted cymbals, 13 or 14 inches in diameter, usually. The bottom hi-hat cymbal is usually heavier, that is thicker than the top one, and it's sometimes got a wavy edge or holes drilled into it so that when the hi-hat closes, the air can get through and you get a sharper sort of sound. The hi-hat's a very versatile little instrument actually in its own right. We'll just play a couple of bars. Okay, you can play all sorts of different rhythms on the hi-hat. Now I'm going to go right across to the other side of the kit, and the other cymbal that you can play rhythms on is called the ride cymbal. It's quite a heavy cymbal, and it's called a ride cymbal because you play continuous patterns on it. If you play on this part of the cymbal, rhythms like this one, say. But it's also got a bell in the middle, which is a much harder, thicker piece of metal. And when you play on that, you get a really cutting sort of sound. I'll do a couple of bars on there as well. Now, as you said, it's a thicker sound so that you can play those patterns on it. These other cymbals, the one at the top here, these are called crash cymbals, and they're usually thinner. So if, for instance, I try to play a ride pattern on this little thin one here, it'll build up into a wash, like this. Okay, it just washes. So obviously that's better for sort of splash accents. Dramatic parts in the rhythm, and the size of these cymbals can range right from this little one over here. That's a 10 inch, but you can actually get them right down to 6 inches, and they can go all the way round. This is an 18 inch one over here, but you can have them bigger than that. You can have 20 inch, 21, 22 even. And finally, this strange looking job over here. This is a China cymbal. And this gives a sort of a trashy sort of sound. Quite often they're played upside down. You can use this for a ride, but you get a very, very open sound. So you can use it for a ride or for a crash sound. I'll just hit it there once so you can get the idea. Are we ready? Finally, we come to the tom-toms. Nowadays, they're most often used for fills. But you can actually use them in a ride fashion. You can play a very simple rhythm like this. Or you can actually play whole rhythms just on the tom-toms. And the most familiar and obvious one in rock music would be this one. And there you have it, the modern drum kit. Now, if you're just starting out, obviously you're not going to go out and buy a really expensive kit like this one. In fact, the first thing you should do, obviously, is to buy a pair of sticks. And actually, in choosing a pair of sticks, it's quite a bit of a minefield. The first thing you should look for, particularly if you're buying cheap ones, is that they're straight and they're not warped. Now, to make sure they're not warped, very easy test, you just roll them on the counter. If they're warped at all, you'll notice straight away. The next thing is you want them to be balanced and to be the same weight. So what you do is you just tap them, and you should find that they feel the same weight and that they make the same sort of pitch sound on the tabletop. This is because sticks cut from different parts of the tree, they can be the same size, but they may actually be different weights. So what you're after is a nice balanced pair of sticks. Another good thing to do is just to check that the grain runs straight through to the tip, because then there's a better chance that it's going to be quite strong. Now, the actual size of the sticks, that depends largely on the size of your hands, what sort of music you want to play, your age perhaps, because if you're very young, be careful not to get really heavy sticks because you want to be a heavy metal player or something, because you might strain your hands and your fingers before you've got used to playing. So the classification is quite tricky. You should be able to get quite a lot of help from your local drum store, but as a general rule, a light pair of sticks are denoted by the letter A, 7A, 5A. A heavier pair of sticks by the letter B. So these are 5B, and you can get 2B. And somewhere in the middle, the average sort of stick, which I suppose probably most people use, sometimes they're denoted as a C, but it's a middle sort of range of stick, and as I say, your local drum store will help you out there. Okay, let's move on to what to buy first. Now, you can actually just start off with a practice pad, any sort of rubber pad, which you can put on any surface, and immediately you can tap away. People get very bored with this pretty quickly, so obviously you want to buy a real drum, and the first drum to buy is, of course, a snare drum. And I've actually got a snare drum here, which is quite cheap, but is of a very good quality. There are a few things to look out for. First of all, the actual tension rods here, the bolts that go into the tension brackets, I'm afraid you're going to have to look at every one. And this applies to the whole kit. If you go beyond buying a snare drum and buy a kit, always look at every rod. Make sure that they all turn properly in the lugs here, because sometimes you can get cross-threading, or they can even be missing. If some of them are missing, it doesn't matter because you can replace them. But if you've got cross-threading, then obviously you're in a little bit more trouble. And also sometimes the actual rim, the hoop, the metal hoops, sometimes they get damaged and bent, so that can prevent you getting the drum key on to tighten the bolt up. That can also cause a problem. The next thing to look for on a snare drum is that the strainer, the actual thing that strains the snare, make sure that that's in good working condition, that it's actually working on the strainer side and on the other side, the butt side. The actual snare itself, make sure that that isn't damaged. Sometimes you get snare wires broken off and so on. And the string that's holding it on, which is sometimes string or sometimes a tape, make sure that those are all there and they're all in good condition. They can obviously be replaced, but sometimes when you're buying second hand, it's difficult to get hold of the parts, and if you can't get them, then you're stuck. The snare drum's useless. So make sure you've got all those things. Okay. Now, the sort of order in which you then go on to buy things, I would say snare drum, first of all, and don't forget that every time you buy a piece of kit, you need the hardware to hold it up. So you buy a snare drum, you're going to need a snare drum stand. Then you move on to the hi-hats, hi-hat pedal, hi-hat cymbals. With those two, you can play a nice rhythm. Then you'd add the bass drum, and again, you're going to need a bass drum pedal. Then you can start adding cymbals and tom-toms as you wish. Make sure that they're all compatible. Sometimes what can happen with tom-toms, if you say you've bought a bass drum and then you want to add some tom-toms, how are you going to mount them onto the bass drum? If you've got the wrong sort of mount, then you're in trouble. And in fact, the easiest answer to this actually is that if you're really keen on drumming, and you've got your sticks and you've tried practice pads, maybe you've tried a snare drum and a hi-hat for a little while, if you really feel it's for you, you're probably better off buying a cheap whole kit, because kits, particularly those produced in the Far East now, are so cheap. The value is so good that it's almost, you're better off and it's safer to buy the whole kit. Just make sure that it's working okay. Now what you mustn't forget is that when you buy a drum kit, you don't get the cymbals. And this is quite a shock to many parents, that the cymbals can cost more than the drums. So all the major cymbal manufacturers make cheap lines of cymbals, and they're perfectly good. They're perfectly good for starting, the same as the drum kits are perfectly good for starting out. And there's a few things to look at with cymbals. In fact, cymbals are more likely to get damaged than drums. There are several common problems. With this one, what's happened is that the centre hole here has been very badly damaged. And now the reason that's happened is because someone hasn't taken care of the cymbal stand. That's someone being me, I'm afraid to say. And at the top of each cymbal stand, you must make sure that you've got a nylon centrepiece, a little nylon tube or plastic tube, and that you've got plenty of felt on either side, so that the cymbal is protected in the middle. Because this cymbal has now started to bend. It hasn't affected the sound very much, but very soon it will start to crack. And cracking, of course, is the big problem with any piece of metal. And if you have a look at this one, now, as you can see with this one, it's been scalloped out, which has been done with a metal saw and then filed down smooth. And the reason it's been scalloped out was because it started to crack. There's a hairline crack there. Now, by scalloping it out, this cymbal actually survived another several years. But eventually this hairline crack will appear, and they're quite tricky to notice sometimes. So you'll get the cymbal home and play it a couple of times and it'll fall to bits. So be very much on the lookout for that. Having said that, I think those are the major points to look out for, and we'll move on. Just like any other instrument, drums need tuning before you can play them. The only difference is, with melodic instruments, you tune them to very specific pitches, A, B, C, D and so on, and they're either in tune or they're not. With a drum, what you do is you tension it until it feels and sounds good to you, and at that point, as far as you're concerned, it's in tune and no one can tell you any different. And this is the first and the biggest area of drum mystique. It causes a lot of problems for drummers. And I've been lucky enough over the last few years to talk to quite a few of the world's great drummers, and as far as I can make out, what most of them do is they come across their own method of tuning via a process of trial and error. However, there are certain common points and rules of thumb that we can go into in a moment, so don't get too disheartened. The first thing to realise is that most of the sound comes from the head. And as a sort of proof of this, if we look at these rototoms here, if I hit a couple of them, you can hear, I hope, that they make quite a lot of noise, and they don't have shells. So what the shell on a proper conventional drum kit does is it alters the sound, adds timbre to the sound, projection and all the rest of it, but most of the sound is in the first place coming from the head. Now, given that, it's amazing how many drummers only change the heads very infrequently. So you're always coming across kits with heads in this sort of condition. These are old ones that I've taken off. As you can see, this is what happens to a head when it's been played a fair amount. It starts to get pitted and dented, and at that point it loses all its spring and loses a lot of its tone and brightness. It's amazing. You can go to a second-hand junk shop and buy a really cheap old kit, and it's almost certainly going to have battered heads on it. And just by putting new heads on that kit, you'll be amazed how much you can give it a new lease of life. So it's well worth bearing in mind. Okay, What sort of heads? You saw a couple of different ones then. There's an amazing variety of heads on the market now, and they all give slightly different sound character. So they range really from something, these are all ones that I've used. This is a double thickness, double layer of plastic, quite thick plastic, what's known as a rock head, which gives a very deep sort of blatty sort of sound. It's got a colour pigment in it as well, and you can get all sorts of different colours, and the actual colours affect the sound just slightly, but you can hear the difference. And they go right through to a much thinner head like this one. This is a single thickness thin head, which is going to give you a much more bright and resonant sound. You can get a single thickness one like this, which has got a coating on, which is more like a traditional head. The coating is quite good. Gives you a nice stick feel, but also very good if you want to play brushes. And another extreme, this is a fabric woven head with a film of plastic over the edge to keep it watertight and weatherproof and so on. So you must bear in mind that the actual head that you use will affect the sound. Just finally, one other type of head which is also very popular on the Rototoms here. This has got, it's a single layer, but it's got a reinforcing black spot in the middle, and that sort of dampens a little bit of the sound. So the thicker heads, some of the resonance is dampened out, some of the overtones are dampened out, gives you a rockier sort of sound. Now, to tune a drum, I'm going to take this drum from down here. Obviously you take the hoop off and get yourself a head. Clean it up round here, check your bearing edge is nice and clean and smooth. If at this point you find that your bearing edge is in a terrible state, that's going to make it very difficult to tune. So you can think about giving it a little bit of very, very light sanding if you've got little bits or whatever on it. But to get it absolutely level is very much a specialist job. So you have to be very careful about that. Just bear in mind that the bearing edge is very important. To get a head nicely tuned, if the bearing edge itself is uneven, then it's going to be very, very difficult to get the drum head even. So you just place the head on, put the collar back over, and do all the tension rods up to finger tight. Like this. Okay, so we've got them all up to finger tight. Like this. Then you take the key, drum key, and either working around the head or diagonally like this, put an equal number of turns at each point. Working crisscrossing like this. Try and get more or less as even as you can. Okay, now if it's a new head, at that point you want to seat it, and you can press quite hard on these heads. I'm pressing that in quite hard. Take it up another turn. So what I've done now is I've gone past the point at which I know it's going to end up. So this should be quite pingy now, I would think. But that's still within the acceptable range of what this drum can take. Just how high or how low you tune your drums is a matter of what you feel, you know, what sounds good to you and what feels nice to you when you play on them, and perhaps what sort of music you're playing. But once you go beyond a certain point, you'll soon know that it's too high for the drum. It'll just start to sound very, very thin indeed. Conversely, if you go too slack, you'll start to get wrinkles in the head, and you'll just get a complete flat blat with a load of rattling going on. You'll know straight away. So somewhere in between those 2 points is the point that you're aiming at. Now, personally, I will go for something a little bit down from that. So I'm going to take it back down again. And I've tried to keep it fairly even at each stage. Now, this is a process that might take you quite a long while. Some people, maybe studio musicians, who do a lot of studio playing where the drums are under the spotlight, so to speak. They might find themselves doing this every day, so they become very, very expert at it. Can do a drum in a few minutes. For anyone else, it might take you quite a long while, but it's time worth, well spent. So I've cut back down to the sort of area. That's the sort of area that I personally like for this sort of drum. And what I'm going to do now is start tapping about an inch, inch and a half in from each tension rod to see what the actual pitch is next to each rod. And the aim is to get the same pitch at each rod. So I'll just quickly tap round here. I don't know if we're going to be able to hear this very well. A little bit higher there. Take the fraction off. Just a fraction, no, just a tiny little bit maybe. Now, by a process of total luck, that head is actually pretty close. Not quite right with the bottom one, but the actual top one is fairly well in tune with itself. Now, it might take quite a lot. I mean, sometimes you can get a head and it's murder. You can spend half an hour going backwards and forwards, round and round in circles. If you get into that situation, it's better to take it right off and start all over again, because what's usually happened is you've pulled it over to one side, something like that. So take it off, start again. But as I say, your end result is to try and get it more or less the same. Once you've done that, you can turn your attention to the bottom head. Now I've got a slightly thinner head on the bottom, a resonant head. So a resonant head will be a little bit brighter than this slightly heavier top head. Nonetheless, I personally try to get it to the same pitch. That way, for me, I have less problems with the whole kit ringing. It just gives it a clearer note for my personal taste. But you can experiment with having the bottom head a little bit lower than top one, or you can experiment with having it a little bit higher than the top one, and it will all give you slightly different effects. You'll just have to experiment with those and see what you think. Now, the next thing to realise is that you haven't just got one, but you've probably got several toms. So we've got 3 on the kit here. And there are all sorts of different intervals that you can go for on the toms. And this depends very much on the size of the toms and the way you tune and the sort of sound that you want to get out of them. But with a spread of 3 toms, these 2 are quite close in size, and this one's quite a lot bigger. So I think the intervals that we've got here, these 2 are quite close, and then there's quite a drop to this one. I'll just bang them for you. Now, those to me are the right sort of intervals for the sort of sound that I like on these particular toms. And the important thing is that they sound like a family, so that they're all ringing in the same sort of way and to the same sort of length of time. Bearing in mind that the bigger the drum, the longer it's going to ring on anyway. But there's a sort of family feel about the toms. And I think it's quite important to try and get that. A lot of people end up damping the drums. If you're going to damp one, it's quite nice to damp all the others, but maybe to slightly different amounts. So you'll end up damping the big one a little bit more than you damp the top one. But as soon as you put a bit of damping on this one, it's going to have a different sound from the next one, and you'll be able to hear that. And while we're talking about damping, this wonderful stuff, gaffer tape, has been used for years, and there are loads of different ways of using this. A nice little one that a lot of people use nowadays is just to make a little loop like that and just dab it on the top. That's called top head damping. That will take a little bit of the overtones, a little bit of rings out. If you don't like that, then try putting it on the bottom. It'll have a slightly different effect, but it'll take a slightly different sort of ring out. You can obviously put a whole strip of gaffer tape on there, and that will take a lot more ring out. Another wonderful recent invention that everybody's using now, these little rings. Loads of people make them now, and you can just drop those over the drum, and that will take a lot out. Now, on a tom-tom, so most people now would find that a bit too much, but where they do work wonderfully is on the snare drum, because particularly with a metal snare drum where you've got the ringing from the extra ring from the metal, it just takes a little bit of that nasty edge ring out. In fact, they work wonders. A really badly tuned snare drum can sound wonderful with one of these on, no problem at all. And while we're talking about the snare drum, I'm just going to pick this one up from over here. The snare drum's a slightly different case. I've got a standard single ply resonant head on the top here, but the bottom head, the snare head, is a totally different head from all the others on the kit. It's a snare head, which is a lot thinner than all the others. And with this, you just tighten this up until more or less, so you've just got the wrinkles out, at which point you can just press it in with your finger. And even then, it's going to be quite high. As you can see, that's quite a high pitch sound, and yet the head isn't particularly taut. How taut you have that is going to affect the response of the snare. So if you have it very, very slack, it can make the snare drag, be a little bit sludgy. If you have it very, very tight, then the snare is going to vibrate very freely. Most important is that the snare is in good condition. If any of the wires break off, snip them off, because if they're hanging around down there, they're going to sort of make a right mess of your sound. So just get a pair of tin snips and snip them away. It's very important that they're exactly symmetrically and squarely positioned across the bottom there, so that when as you pull the tension on, they lie straight across the head. That way you're going to have a lot less trouble with snare rattle, sympathetic buzz and so on. And while we're on that subject, this snare drum on the kit, you notice the strainer is here, so that the snare is going across. This is a good way to have it, because you can get at the snare very easily, get it on and off very easily with your left hand while you're still playing. Also, it's less likely to be affected, slightly less likely to be affected by sympathetic resonance. But some sort of snare buzz is almost inevitable in any drum kit, because one of these tom-toms is almost sure to be tuned fairly close to the snare drum, and it'll set the snare buzzing when you hit the tom-tom. The less number of tom-toms you've got, then the easier it is to tune them so that they don't affect the snare drum. But nowadays, when people have got 4 or 5 toms, one of them's sure to cause trouble. There's not much of an answer to that. I mean, if you've got the toms tuned brilliantly, then try adjusting the actual tension of the snare and the tension of the snare heads slightly, and that might get rid of it. Alternatively, if your snare drum's sounding fantastic, then alter the tuning of the tom, the offending tom, a little bit. But I think the main thing is not to lose any sleep over it, because particularly in live situations, you're always going to get some snare buzz. If the drums don't set it off, then the bass guitar will. As with the snare drum, the bass drum is a special case. Now this bass drum that I've got here today, we've got it tuned for quite a rocky sound, and by that I mean it's quite heavily damped. Although the trend nowadays seems to be moving towards slightly more resonant bass drums. People are actually putting front heads back on bass drums, which they never did a few years ago. Nonetheless, we've got a front head on this bass drum with a hole cut out of it. We've got a blanket inside it. There's also a foam muffle ring just behind the batter head, and I've tuned the batter head just to take the wrinkles out, so it's pretty slack actually, because when the bass drum's mic'd up, what the engineer usually wants is a good hard slap, a deep slap, which you get from a fairly slackly tuned head. And to increase that at the point of impact where the bass drum actually makes contact with the head, People use rock pads, various little discs that stick onto the head, just to give even more of a click to the impact. Today what we've done is put some gaffer tape on with a coin underneath it. This is a sort of little trick that some people use. The hard metal coin gives a nice hard click, so that you get a really, really punchy sort of bass drum sound. As you can see, tuning the kit is a very big subject, with lots of imponderables and variables, but I hope anyway that that's giving you a start and that there are a few pointers in there that will help you on your way. Okay, now we've had a good look at the kit, we can actually pick up the sticks and begin to play. And this is where we encounter the second area of drumming mystique, because a lot of people have got very strange ideas about how to hold the sticks. In actual fact, it's not difficult at all. And the best answer that I've come across, someone once told me, was to throw the sticks onto the floor and ask someone to pick them up. And as you can see, the way Lindsay's picked them up is a perfect matched grip. Really is as simple as that. Now, mystique that I talked about, this grew out of this rather unusual left-hand grip, which is the so-called orthodox grip. And to understand why some drummers use that grip, we have to go back to the origins of the snare drum again in the marching side drum. In military bands, in order to be able to march, the musician has to sling the drum to one side, hence the term side drum. And also, of course, the normal grip becomes a bit practical because you have your elbow right up here. Therefore, the orthodox grip developed like this. I should just say that a lot of the world's top drummers do still use this grip. And I think the reason is because it developed through the history of jazz, and it gives quite a nice jazzy sort of feel. So if you're playing like this, for instance, it's got a nice sort of whippy feel about it. But let's get back to the match grip, which is what most people use, certainly what I use. And the first thing to do is to make sure that you're relaxed, that your weight goes down through the stool, that your arms are nice and almost hanging loose at your side, and that your shoulders are as relaxed as you can get them. So you pick up the stick. Now the stick is almost like an extension of the forearm, in as much as that's almost a straight line, straight through the wrist, down the stick. Now, this position here, about a third of the way down the stick, is called the fulcrum. And the reason it's called that is it's a little bit like a seesaw, in that at this point the stick turns most easily around the fulcrum grip here. If you hold it sort of down here somewhere, then you're going to have a real problem making the stick turn. And if you hold it right up the end here, you've got all the weight of the stick in front of you. Bit whip-like. Can be useful sometimes, but for 99% of the time you'll find there's a good balance point here. The stick does the work for you. Now you should try to keep the thumb on the stick as best you can, and the grip there is with the first joint of the first finger, if you can see. The other fingers wrap around the stick, and the stroke is made as a combination of fingers and wrists. As the wrist turns, the fingers open out, and as the wrist turns back again, they close down. So you get this sort of motion. If the wrist didn't turn, then you'd get this, which pretty obviously is stiff. It's not what you want. So you want the wrist to turn. Conversely, if the wrist doesn't move but the fingers move, then you get a nice little finger snap there, you can probably see. That's very useful for playing quick, delicate beats. But for most of our playing, you'll use a combination of the wrist and the fingers. And as you get louder, of course, the forearm comes into play, so you can end up playing right up here. For those of you who want to have a go at the orthodox left-hand grip, I'll just quickly mention that in this instance the fulcrum is here, the base of the thumb, and the fingers wrap round. It goes through right through the middle there, the stick. And you get a sort of a cross here between the thumb and the first joint, and you get this sort of motion. And in this instance, as you can see, the wrist is actually turning completely. It's not turning that way. If it turns that way, obviously you're going to be all over the place. So it has to actually turn that way in order to get a vertical motion. Right, that's enough about sticks. Let's have a look at the feet. Now here, your posture becomes even more important. It really is important that you try to keep as relaxed as you can. And a very important thing to realise is that your sitting position makes a big impression on your balance and your feet. And this goes in different fashions. There have been fashions where people have sat very high on the stool. If I pull this right up, you'll see sometimes people will sit right up high. And then in this instance, their legs will be sloping down, and you can end up sort of falling over. Now, over the last few years, people have been sitting very low. You have to be careful in that instance that you don't end up falling backwards. So your sitting position is something that you'll have to find for yourself, where you feel most comfortable and relaxed. Most people, it's probably around somewhere where your thigh is horizontal or just sloping down a little bit perhaps, so that when you lift the foot, you're not having to sort of come right up here or something really awkward. Okay, now there are several different strokes on the with the feet, the same as with the hands, and they particularly apply to the bass drum. First of all, the obvious one, with the foot planted squarely on the pedal, and in this instance the stroke obviously is made from the ankle, and you can get this sort of feel. Now, because of rock playing, people have started to play a lot louder, and there's a technique developed where the heel is lifted off the back of the plate, perhaps not too far, maybe an inch, inch and a half perhaps, and for absolute maximum volume, you may want to even bring your foot a little bit further back so that it's almost halfway down the plate. Then you can get a lot of momentum, and you find yourself using your whole leg, and you can play quite loud. 2, 3. Now, in between these two things, there's a way of using both, a little bit of both. So you get an almost rocking motion, and you maybe want to use it for this sort of rhythm. So you can see there's a sort of a rocking motion where you're using both ways of playing. Now, another important point is that sometimes you'll find that you're digging the beater into the head, particularly when you've got a heavily damped bass drum. Sometimes that feels quite nice, it works quite well. On other occasions, you'll let the beater come right back off the head, sort of. Now, I think it's very important that you practice both those methods. As for the other foot, the hi-hat foot, this is also played with the heel down and with the heel up, but obviously you don't need to use the same sort of degree of force that you use with the bass drum. The important thing really is that you just get a nice balance going. Now that we know how to hold the sticks and what to do with the feet, what are we going to do with it? Well, interestingly, the basic technique of drumming, the single stroke roll, you can learn on the first day and you can go on practicing forever. And just before we start doing that, I want to mention that perhaps the most important thing that a drummer has to do is to learn to play good strict time and play steadily. And for this purpose, most drummers nowadays use a metronome, or better still, a drum machine. It can be any cheap drum machine or a metronome. The advantage of a drum machine is that you can turn it up through an amplifier and make it louder so that you can hear it. But it's a very good thing right from the beginning to practice doing everything with the machine as often as you can. Now, to play the single strokes, we just play hand to hand, one beat with each hand. So you get yourself nice and relaxed, and then I'm just going to start the machine going just to give us a count. I'll count in 4, and I'll just play single strokes at different tempos to show you what I mean. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, you should practice playing like that, doubling up the tempo until you get to a speed which is comfortable, but try not to go out of control. It's also very important to try practicing at all different tempos, so set the machine to as many different tempos as you can, and also to play softly as well as loudly. And to play softly, you'll need to use your fingers a little bit like we demonstrated before, and you can play nice and softly like this. So you can practice your dynamics from soft to loud, but you don't have to do it quickly. The lower that your stroke goes to, the quieter the beat will be. The higher your stick goes, the louder the beat will be. So practice all of these different things. Another good idea is to practice with both hands together, because sometimes you can spend so much time trying to get your hands to go apart that when you try to put them together, they won't go together. So try doing this. And also don't forget the feet. Try playing and in fact, as I did with the feet there, always try leading with the right and leading with the left. So there are all these different variations, and they're all based on the single stroke roll, and you should try and do as many of them as you can every day. We've already tried counting in 4 and then keeping a steady tempo, and the reason for that is that most of popular music is in 4 beats to the bar. You've all seen drummers going 1, 2, 3, 4, and off they go. And that's setting the time and the tempo for the band, and then you try and stick to that. So in order to play the whole kit, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to count in 4 beats, and then we'll start by playing the right cymbal on all 4 of those beats, nice and slowly like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. So we keep going and add the bass drum on 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now the hi-hat goes on 2 and 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Only the snare drum left. That goes on 2 and 4, same as the hi-hat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this can be represented graphically, and I'm sure you'll all recognise it. If you're left-handed, it's okay. Just turn the kit the other way around, and in that instance you'll be leading with your left hand and you'll be playing the bass drum with your left foot. That's fine. You can also play that rhythm on the hi-hat instead of on the ride cymbal, and that's quite a lot easier because your left foot in this case remains stationary, so you're only really using 3 limbs. So you get this: 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now in doing this rhythm, we've overcome the third area of mystique in drumming, which is reading. A lot of drummers are quite frightened of reading, and there's really no reason, because if you see that rhythm in proper notation, you'll recognise it straight away. It's really quite simple. There are 4 beats in each of the bar, and those 4 beats are quarter beats, quarter notes, crotchets. So there are 4 of them, 4 quarter notes, and this is known as a time signature of the music. Each bar is in 4/4 time. The beats themselves are written on lines, horizontal lines, which are known as the stave. The drums are a dot and the cymbals are a cross. And at each end of the bar you have vertical lines, and these are the vertical bar lines. Now, because drum parts are very often repeated over and over again, in this instance we've got double lines with a couple of dots. That tells you to repeat the same pattern over and over again. Now, although this is a very simple pattern, believe it or not, you can actually use it in very musical situations. People do actually go out there and play it. What's important is how well you play it. If you play it with conviction, you can use it in musical situations. Of course, there aren't just quarter notes, there are all sorts of different notes, and the next one we're going to move on to is the 8th note, which, as you might suspect, there are twice as many of those as there are of quarter notes. So if we count our 4 to the bar again, like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I change this to 8, we get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now if I add the rest of the kit in exactly the same way as we did before, we'll get this rhythm. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now that's your all-purpose basic rock drum rhythm. Now you can also play it on the hi-hat, as we said before, and another good variation is to double the bass drum. So I'm giving you 2 different things here. We're going to have the bass drum on all 4 beats as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and... Now the important thing about that is that you've got the bass drum rooting it, and you've got the snare drum on the offbeat or the backbeat. In notation, it looks like this. The 8th note, or the quaver, is like the crotchet, but it's got a little tail on it. When you've got a group of them together, you tie the tails together, so it makes it easier to read. Now, I'm going to play a few variations. Just listen to these. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, what was different with those? Yep, the bass drum. We vary the bass drum. And this is, in fact, the first thing that most people do when they start to vary their basic rock rhythms. Now, in fact, you can play a nice little game sitting on the bus, wherever you are. Just need a scrap of paper, write 8 dashes on the paper, and then arbitrarily stick a ring round any of them you like. Those become your bass drum parts, okay? And you just sit there and see if you can play them. Do some awkward ones as well. There are some obvious ones which you'll know straight away, but there are some strange ones, like for instance, just put it on the 2 and you'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Very important that you can put the bass drum on any of those. Now I'm going to give you a few examples with the graphics up. And follow these along and you'll see what I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm sure you could follow those. Now, it begs the question, why do we change the bass drum? Well, the reason is, at its simplest, that very often when you attempt to get a groove together with your band, what you're doing is working very closely with the bass guitar player. And the bass drum very often underpins, plays with the bass guitar. Not necessarily exactly what the bass guitar is going to play, but pretty close to it. Now, another idea, if you get bored with those rhythms, is to mix together pairs of different rhythms. So you have one bar of one rhythm, one bar of another rhythm, alternate them, and you get a two-bar pattern, which is actually much more interesting. So, for instance, if we take this rhythm, 2, 3, and 4, and this rhythm, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and... Now, if we put those two together and alternate them, we get this. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and... Now, there are actually loads of different rhythms like that you can try out. And don't forget, you can play them as slowly as you like, and better still, play them with the drum machine. Now, as well as notes in music, sometimes you want to create space, and in order to do that in notation, we have things called rests. So in the same way as you can have a quarter note, you can have a quarter note rest, and the same way as you can have an eighth note, you can have an eighth note rest, and these look like this. So let's take our basic 4 beats to the bar, and say for instance we want to miss out the second beat. We'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's miss out both middle beats. We're going to miss out 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Now, once we start to use eighth rests, it becomes a lot more interesting. The rhythms that you can come up with are much more complicated. It's a good idea when you're doing these to keep the same hand movement, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. But when you come to the beats which are going to be missed out because there's a rest, you don't hit the drum at that point, but you stay with the same right, left movement. Should be clear if you watch me do a couple here. First one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Next one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 3 and 4. Now, all these things I've been leading with the right hand. You should also lead with the left hand. Do them the other way. way around. There are millions of these. What you need to do now, there are loads of good drum books on the market, and they will show you loads of different patterns. Also, work as many out for yourself as you can. Now, in a moment, we're going to put all this together and start using the drum kit as a whole, rhythms and fills. But first of all, it's very important to realise that when you're playing drums, you're playing music. And most of popular music is divided into 8 sections. So you have choruses, verses, middle eights, and so on. And very often, what the drummer does is play a steady rhythm through the 8 bars, and in the 8th bar, as a lead-in to the next section, and maybe a slight change of mood or a little something to grab your attention, he'll play a fill. That fill can be very small, or it can be very dramatic, depending on the circumstances. So we're going to have a look at those. But the first we have to do, before we can go on to that, we have to have a look at how to get around the kit. So this is where we can actually start to bring the toms into use. Now, if we take our 8 beats, as we've been looking at, and if we play 8 of them, that'll make up exactly 1 bar. And just by a stroke of luck, the modern drum kit here, with its snare drum and 3 tom-toms, if you play hand to hand, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, around the kit, that will fill exactly 1 bar, because we've got 8 beats. So I'll show you what I mean. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... brings you right out onto your lead right hand, and you can crash the cymbal at that point if you want, and it will fill exactly 1 bar. So that's a good place to start. Now what you can do is play 7 bars of time and then play 1 bar of fill. And this is what you are likely to be doing in most musical situations. Now, because I haven't got so much time now, what I shall do is I shall play 3 bars of time and 1 bar of fill. I'm going to utilise just the 8th beats and the quarter beats and the quarter and 8th rest that we've been talking about. And I'm going to do it with the drum machine, because the commonest mistake that people make is they'll play great time, they'll come to do the fill, it'll be all over the place, they'll lose the rhythm completely, the band will fall apart, and you're in dead trouble. So, here we go, I'm going to set the drum machine going. Now, another thing which is really difficult to learn is that a drum fill can be really simple. In fact, your band will probably appreciate you more if you play simple fills most of the time and give them a good solid beat. So you can actually just play 1 extra beat maybe. So perhaps you're playing on the hi-hat through the verse and you want to go up to the ride cymbal for the chorus, which is a very standard sort of ploy. And you could just put in 1 extra beat. That probably is all that's needed. So just to show you exactly what I mean, I'll just play 4 bars on the hi-hat, and then I'll put 1 little extra beat in and go up to the ride cymbal. So you'd have something like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and... Now, another good trick you can play with a drum machine is to program several bars of rhythm for you to play along to, and then you leave a gap, program a gap, just one bar. And the idea is that you're playing along and the gap suddenly appears from nowhere, and you keep on playing, and hopefully you'll hit the very first beat of the next bar when it comes back in. This is a great way to improve your time. Now I've just programmed a few in here, so let's see how it goes. Everything that we've done so far has been in 4/4, which is also known as common time. But of course there are other time signatures. For instance, I'm sure you all know that waltzes are in 3/4 time, and you count waltzes like this. You go 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1. But you can also have 5/4 time, 6/4 time, 7/4 time, 9/4 time, whatever you like. And also you can change the pulse. So instead of having a quarter note pulse, you could for instance have an eighth note pulse. And a very common time signature in popular music is 12/8 time. And interestingly, that's still got 4 strong beats, but instead of dividing the 4s into 2 so that you get 8s, as we've done before, you know, we've been going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In this instance, you divide the 4 strong beats into 3s so that you get 12 eighth beats, and you get this: 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. Now, you can do exactly the same as we did with the 8s. Start messing around with the bass drum. And you can get a sheet of paper again and draw 12 little lines, put circles around them, wherever you like. And you'll start to come up with different forms of rhythm within the 12/8 feel. So I'll just improvise through a few of them. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2. Okay, there are loads of little variations on that. And in fact, it's, that sort of rhythm is the basis of a lot of early rock and roll. There are certain feels that if you hear them, you'll recognise them straight away. In fact, I'm going to just play one now with my mate on the bass guitar here, and I'm sure you'll recognise it when you hear it. Interestingly, 12/8 rhythms are also a feature of songs which have 12-bar forms quite often. In fact, 12/8's the basis of most slow blues tunes, and we're going to play a slow blues for you now. By now you'll probably be realising that in order to learn to play drums you have to deal with quite a lot of maths and fractions. So let's have a look at a different way of dividing up the beat. Now we started with quarter beats and we divided them in half to get eighth beats, eighths, quavers. You can in actual fact divide each quarter beat into three, and when you do that what you get is an eighth note triplet. Now, I'll just explain what I mean by that before we go any further. I'll play 4 quarters on the bass drum, and then I'll halve them to get 8 eighths on the hi-hat, and then I'll bring in the triplets on the snare drum, and you should see the relationship. So, nice and slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, eighths. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and Okay, so you can see that what happens is that 3 eighth triplets take exactly the same time as 2 eighth beats. Now you can also do the same thing with quarter notes, and in this instance 3 quarter note triplets will take the same time as 2 quarter notes. So again, I'll play on the bass drum with 4s, and then we'll do the quarter triplets on snare drum. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so quarter note triplets, 3 quarter note triplets takes the same time as 2 quarter notes, eighth note triplets, 3 eighth note triplets take the same time as 2 eighth notes. Now, to play triplets on the snare drum as a roll, if we go back to our single stroke roll, what you'll find is that your lead is going from your right to your left, to your right to your left, or if you're left-handed, left to your right, left to your right, and so on. And the reason for this, of course, is because a triplet is an odd number. So you're playing in groups of 3. So we have 1, 2, 3. Now, a good way to get used to the sound and the feel of triplets is to give yourself a good steady quarter note pulse on the bass drum or the hi-hat, or even using the drum machine, and then just improvise quarters, eighths, quarter triplets, eighth triplets, whatever you can think of, and just keep on playing them over this steady pulse to get used to the way they sort of fit and slot in. Maybe something like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and Now, in the same way as you can have eighth note rests and quarter note rests, yes, you guessed it, you can have eighth note triplet rests and quarter note triplet rests. And when you start putting those in, your rhythms become even more complicated. So, same sort of thing to do. Get a quarter note pulse going and start to drop out some of the eighth note triplets. And you start to get rhythms like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and with quarter note triplets, again, it's a little bit more strange. Very, very spacey. You can get a very, very spacey sort of feel. So again, pulse on the hi-hat, and we'll play some quarter note triplets with some rests. Okay, as you can see, those sort of feels give you a lot of space in the rhythm. Now, let's move on to actually how to get around the kit using triplets, because you've got a different problem than you had with the eighth notes, which is that with triplets you're dealing with an odd number. So when you start to do rolls, you find that you're moving from your right hand to your left hand, from your right hand to your left hand, as we saw before. And that means that when you go around the kit, you've got to be very careful, otherwise you'll suddenly find you're on your left hand when you thought you were going to be on your right hand, and you can get into the most enormous mess and start dropping sticks and all sorts. So you've got to get this sort of clear in your head. So if we start with just ordinary eighth note triplets, in order to do a triplet and get onto this tom-tom and then to get onto this one and then to get onto this one, you can start by doing 6 beats on each hand. So you get this, you get. Okay, that's going to lead you onto your right hand again. Now, you're going to see how this is going to work when we start to increase the tempo a bit and we move into the area which is known as shuffles. Now, to get into that, what you have to do is you leave out some of the eighth note triplets in a triplet 4/4 beat. So if we start off with the straight 4/4 beat, we have this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and now if we leave out some of those triplet eighth notes here, if we leave out the and, you'll find that you start to get a sort of shuffling rhythm. So if we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 1. Now if I speed that up a little bit, you'll see what I mean. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, and again we can start changing the bass drum and we'll start to get some familiar shuffle rhythms. So if I move over onto the right cymbal, and we start to change the bass drum around, we'll see what happens. 1 under, 2 under, 3 under, 4. Okay, now you can do them a lot slower than that if you like, of course, and gradually work them up into that sort of speed as you get more and more confident. Now, as I was saying before, in order to get little fills into that sort of feel where you've triplets going on, you've got to think a bit harder about how you're going to get around the kit so that you don't get yourself into a mess. So as we saw, you're playing in groups of 3s, and by playing groups of 6 here, you're going to get all the way around the kit. And if you think about it, you've played 2 bars worth of beats there. So if you want to play 1 bar, you're going to have to play half that amount. So for instance, what you can do is just play. Okay? And you'll find that if you put that into your shuffle rhythms, you'll have a nice little 1 bar fill. So I'll just do a few of those and see how they sit into the rhythm. 1 under, 2 under, 3 under, 4 under. So you can practice all different ways of getting around the kit using these triplets, making sure that you come out onto your right hand. Give yourself a nice steady pulse. Use the drum machine like we did before. That's a really good way of getting those shuffles solid and making sure that if you do put in a little fill, you're going to come out onto the lead hand so that you don't mess yourself up. Now, there's one further stage that we should take this sort of rhythm to, and this is by taking out one more 8th note triplet. So we've taken the ands, 1 and, to get the shuffle. We've taken the 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4. Now if we take one more out, which is actually the ah of the first beat and the ah of the 3rd beat in every bar, which if I play it, you'll recognise it straight away. So we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, that is the derivation of the well-known jazz rhythm. So if you play it on your ride cymbal, you get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, and it's because of that rolling triplet feel that you get what people call swing. And that's another area that you can explore as you get more confident, but for now I think we should stop there. Right, onwards and upwards. There's one more subdivision of the beat that we should look at in this course, and that is the 16th note. So we've had quarters, we've had 8ths, and now we're going to divide the 8ths into half one more time to get 16ths. So if we take our 4 pulse again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E. Okay, so we've taken the quarter note pulse and divided it 4 more times to get 16. And of course, we can do exactly the same as we've done before. Put the bass drum on the downbeat, snare drum on the backbeat, on the 2 and the 4, and you'll get this. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. Okay, now we'll come back to some kit rhythms in a minute, but first of all, let's look at how this affects our hand-to-hand playing. We've got quarter notes, we've got eighths, and we've got 16ths. So again, in order to get used to the idea of 16ths and the transition between, the relation between all these, get yourself a pulse going and try playing all sorts of different combinations. So this is just going to be quarters, eighths, 16ths. All on the snare drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all combinations of 8/16ths. As you can see, I was very strongly leading with the right hand there again. Please don't forget, do them left-handed as well. I'll just do a couple of bars of left-handed, just to show you what I mean, because I haven't done any of that yet. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see what I'm saying is, even if you're right-handed like I am, don't neglect your left hand. In fact, really, you should practice more leading with the left hand, and if you did, you become a terrific drummer. Unfortunately, most of us don't, but maybe you can be the one who does and become the world's greatest drummer. Okay, as well as having 16th notes, you can have 16th note triplets. 3 16th note triplets take the same time as 2 16th notes. So if I play some 16ths and then I move up to 16th triplets, you should be able to hear the way that works. Okay, do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can, of course, also have 16th note triplet rests, and I'm going to play little bits of mixing quarters, 8ths, 16ths, mixing them all up again with some 16th triplets, and maybe a few 16th triplet rests will creep in there as well. Here we go. So you can see we get into some pretty complicated rhythms now, and what makes them even more complicated and can make them even more interesting is the fact that you can put accents in there. And if the truth were known, I've been putting accents into all these rhythms right from the beginning, but I haven't been letting on. But for instance, when I play those 16ths, 2, 3, 4. I'm accentuating the downbeat every time, just to make it obvious where the little groups of 4 are. And so it's a very good idea to practice using accents in all these rhythms, and you can discover some amazing stuff if you do that. And you can accent on any of the beats with your right hand or any of the beats with your left hand. In fact, it just reminded me when I was playing those little exercise then, there's one little rhythm which goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 16ths with a little rest in there, and it's quite a nice little rhythm, that, and it reminded me of something that I remember hearing a lot when I first started to play drums. Ringo used to throw this into Beatles stuff a lot. He used to play a fill like that, which would go, I think now, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so, and this harks back to what we were saying a little while earlier. By playing these rhythms hand to hand and remembering that sort of movement of right, left, right, left, right, left, right, by putting accents in there so you get a different sort of feel, and by slipping the notes out, you can get something which is completely different. I mean, in actual fact, that little well-known Ringo fill is just one bar of 16th beats. But by putting an accent where it is and missing one of the 16ths out, you get... Say, by keeping that hand-to-hand notation, you get... You can see the transition, and that's what makes these exercises come alive. So once you've played them in a sort of static, sort of level sort of form, you can then sort of experiment putting accents all over the place. Let me just give you another little idea. Another one that's just come into my mind. There's a rhythm that people play leading with the right hand on the floor tom. Someone actually had a big hit record playing this once, and it's so simple. And if you can get this one down, you can impress your family and friends straight away. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So what I'm doing there is just playing 16ths, but I'm leading very strongly with the right hand and putting a little thing in there. No prizes for recognising that. And this, the next step with that is that you can now start spreading all this stuff all over the drums anywhere you like, and putting rhythms in as well. So let me just take that rhythm, because it's quite an easy rhythm, and instead of playing it all down there, put it across the toms, and you'll get something like this, say 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to get really exciting, you can start putting the accent on the cymbal instead of on the drums, and you can get something like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what I was doing then, instead of playing the accent on the drum, I was playing the accent with the foot and hitting the cymbal at the same time. And you can see you can very quickly get into all sorts of different stuff there. Now all that was leading with the right hand. Again, don't forget the left hand. Here's another little simple one. Putting accents in with the left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Probably the first one that most people play. Okay, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what I'm doing there is you can make an accent either by hitting harder or by hitting harder and hitting a different surface. So immediately, just very simple, straightforward rhythms start to come to life. And in the same way that we had this little game where you put some dashes on paper and just circle them out, you could conceivably do the same thing with your rolls. If you get bored and can't think of anything to do, just maybe put 16 dashes on a piece of paper, circle any of them that you like, and those become your accents within the 16th, so that you end up playing accents in all sorts of strange places. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can play rhythms like that all over the kit and drive yourself completely mad. But let's get back to our kit rhythms. We started off playing our 16th on the hi-hat or on the ride cymbal with your lead hand, your right or your left, in this sort of fashion. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and Now, that's great for sort of mid-tempo feels like that. You can get quite funky with it. But a lot of stuff nowadays is a lot faster than that. So you can imagine if you sort of count in 1, 2, 3, 4, you're not going to be able to actually do it with your right hand. You're going to get in a right old mess. So what people do is they play the 16s with both hands on the hi-hat and still retain the snare drum on the 2 and the 4. Now, in order to do that, you have to, in actual fact, play the snare drum with your right hand if you're a right-handed player. Let me show you what I mean by that. If we start off with a 4 pulse, and I'm going to play 8s, and then I'm going to play the snare drum with the right hand, you'll see what I mean. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now, if I start playing 16s, the snare drum will stay on the 2 and the 4, and we'll get all the in-between beats on the hi-hat. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? So that's the way it's done. You have to bring your hand across. If you're left-handed, you're going to be doing it the other way around, and your left hand will be coming across and hitting the snare drum. So immediately, that opens up a whole different way of playing. If you start to think in terms of playing with both hands on the hi-hat and bringing your hand across, the next thing you think to yourself is, well, why don't I bring my left hand across? And this is where your practice of using different accents and so on all over the kit can be brought into play whilst playing a steady rhythm. I'm just going to show you the most obvious one, the basic one for now. I'm going to bring the right hand across in the normal places, but I'm going to bring the left hand across just in one place. Just start off with one place, and then you can experiment and put them wherever you like. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you can see how that's done. Now, the next stage on from that is, instead of leaving your left hand on the hi-hat, just leave your left hand on the snare drum. And this is where you're going to need your ability to play 16ths. and accents, and also to play softly. So all that stuff we were talking about right at the very beginning, about practicing your single strokes very softly and loudly and in combination, this is where it starts to have its effect. So what we do is we play the left hand very softly, but when we play the 2 and the 4 on the snare drum, you hit that quite hard. So it's exactly the same rhythm as we were doing on the hi-hat, except for instead of playing it here, I'm going to play it here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now if we bring in that accent that we did before when we had our hands on the hi-hat and we brought the left hand under, so what we're doing now is playing exactly the same rhythm. I'm leaving the left hand on here and playing the light strokes, but I'm going to accent the 1, which is the same one that we brought across from the hi-hat. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so immediately all sorts of possibilities open up there. Now, this is for you to explore. You've got all the different things that you need. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play out, and I'm going to play just 16ths, only 16ths on the kit, and I'll see if I can think of a few different variations to play. And it'll incorporate all the things we've talked about accents, about playing softly, about playing loudly, about putting it in different parts of the kits. But just remember, all it is right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, playing 16ths.